Just listening to these stories makes you feel like you're on the sidelines with these guys. But it's not over yet. This hour, get ready for some stories of the Auburn Legends' favorite games.
A little bit for the fans here as we go into the fourth quarter. And there's a couple areas we really hadn't touched on a whole lot. One is early 60s and one is early 2000s. And Tom, I want to get you to talk a little bit about that 62, 63, 64 group that really had some special players in there that none of them are with us today except you. So that was a team that really gave Auburn fans some memories.
Well, the 1963 football team was an exceptional group of athletes. I was a freshman that year, and I had the opportunity to practice against them an awful lot, and I can attest they were outstanding athletes. Perhaps as good an athlete that has ever been at Auburn is certainly recognizable to Auburn fans, and that's Tucker Frederickson. And another great athlete was Jimmy Seidel. And they were kind of the leaders of that team that included on defense Bill Cody and John Cochran and Jack Thornton, and there was just George Rose was the next year was the NFL Rookie of the Year for the Minnesota team. But they were just John Kilgore was a great punter, Woody Woodall was a great kicker, and they were a 9-win team that really lost to Mississippi State and was actually a better team than Mississippi State. Just had a bad day and lost a hard-fought game to Nebraska in the Orange Bowl. But and they came back in '64 to be in preseason Sports Illustrated #1 team in the nation, and the Sports Illustrated jinx hit them, and Jimmy Seidel, who was the quarterback and had led the nation as quarterback in rushing the year before, injured his shoulder, which I think now is a rotator cuff, but at that time, Kenny, we just called it a tear in the muscle.
Didn't recognize it.
And he ended up suffering through the season and ended up moving to halfback, and I started the last 3 ball games at quarterback on that team, and I was honored to be a part of that group. They were a good group of athletes, and they did some really good things at Auburn. And unfortunately, Jimmy Seidel passed away a couple of years ago, but he was truly an outstanding athlete and was a valuable part of Auburn history. I had the unique pleasure to play for Coach Dooley as a freshman, and then play against him. And 1 year as a quarterback and 1 year as a running back. You were talking about quarterbacks and running backs. Well, I had a little bit of it both. I went from the worst passing quarterback to the best passing fullback in 1 ball game. But I had a little trouble with the clock play as quarterback. I can remember 2 occasions where the clock play was called, and one of them was right before the half against Georgia Tech, and Don Lewis, who was our kicker, came on the field and said, clock play. And so I had to look around and find a place for him in the backfield and put him at fullback, I think, and threw the ball over the wide receiver's head and killed the clock. The only problem, it was 4th down. So we handed over, and then up in Tennessee, we were tied with Tennessee and ran the clock play, and as I was trained, I raised up and threw it over the receiver's head as I was supposed to. The only problem there was that the defensive back had not gone out to cover him. If I'd just thrown it to him, he could have walked into the end zone. But so those plays probably had a lot to do with my end up being moved to fullback.
Don't feel bad, because Kenny Stabler did the same thing against Tennessee in Birmingham.
It was the very same day, as a matter of fact.
4th down, same day.
Same day.
And Tom's group that he's talked about, 63, was extremely quick football team, as quick as I can can recall, that was my last year at Auburn. And as I reflect on that, Pat and I both have been very fortunate to be at institutions where great foundations have been laid. And in my case, Wally Butts was at Georgia and laid a great foundation, and Coach Dye played for him, and then Coach Jordan, of course, and that it makes me reflect back to this 57 national championship team, which I thought we might have spent a few minutes on, because that quarterback that was just mentioned, Lloyd Nix, it's an incredible story. So many of the quarterbacks here, and the intangible qualities of being winners certainly wasn't Lloyd Nix. But we did have a discipline problem with the quarterback. And the quarterback at the time was dismissed in the summer. So Lloyd Nix was a right halfback under a T formation and had played quarterback in high school. So we moved him to quarterback. And he did not lose a football game for the next 2 years. 57 and 58. 58 team was tied, but it was 2 undefeated seasons. What's interesting, he played first base in baseball, so they moved him to pitcher. I don't think he lost a baseball game pitching. He would win ball games 1-0. It may be 10-9, 7-6, whatever it took, he would win. And you're talking about a winner. He was a real winner. And a good part of the reason, too, is he had an outstanding group of people. When you talked about running backs, you can talk about Tommy Larino. He can run with the running backs of the great Auburn running backs. And when you talk about an athlete that could compete, Jackie Burkett could fly and could play the game. And there were some others on there. So I'm going to let those 2 guys talk about that 57 national championship team that only gave up, was it 4 touchdowns?
4 touchdowns.
4 touchdowns in 10 ball games.
Let me say this about Jackie Burkett. Y'all don't mean it. He played basketball, baseball, and obviously played football at Auburn. And that, I don't know. I know Coach Dooley played basketball and football when he was there. I don't know if he played baseball or not. But this guy's a remarkable athlete. and he could outrun any back we had on our team. If you ever see a highlight of the Alabama-Auburn game, we beat them 40-0. He intercepts a pass and outruns everybody. I mean, if you see that thing, he just flies by everybody going in the end zone, leaves everybody. Doesn't need any blocking because he just outrun everybody. But I'd like to say one thing about the 57, that era. Coach Dooley's crowd and that first group of Coach Jordan's teams set the modern era of Auburn football. They began it. Our group took it to the next level. And we took it to a pretty high level by winning the national championship. And then all you guys have done such a great, wonderful job. I think it's built on those 8 years, from 51 to 59, with some remarkable players and outstanding players. That we're sitting here with Jackie, and I have to, and Ken played on the 58 team, and Red Phillips and Zeke Smith. Zeke was an Outland Award winner. All of them are All-Americans, and Jerry Wilson, a great All-SEC player. There's many of them. If you try to name them, you'd leave them all out. But there was something else unique about Auburn in that era. 56 to 59, Auburn won its first ever SEC baseball championship, which Jack and I played on that team. It won its first SEC basketball championship, the first time they'd ever done that. Won the first SEC and national championship in that 3 years. And Coach Hutchell was always winning the SEC track. So Auburn in 3 years won all the major SEC, and that's were the major sports back in those days. They didn't have all this stuff that they got going on now. So it was a great, we call it the golden era of Auburn sports, not just because of the football, but they were winning in all sports, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful time to be there. And reflect a little bit. I hear some of the stories you guys tell about Coach Jordan, and I talked to Kenny and us about that. Before a ball game, I don't think he ever said more to us than, let's go. There wasn't any win one for the Gipper. There wasn't any of this, and you remember this, Coach Dooley. You were probably in some of those dressing rooms before we go out on the field. We didn't do that. There was not a rah-rah. It was very business-like, very methodical situation. We just went and did the job. He had us prepared. We did the job. And I recall this day, instead of, let's go beat Alabama, and none of that stuff was said. He said, all right, guys, let's go. That's about all he ever said when it was time to go to the field. And we had a great run at it, and it was a great pleasure to be a part of that. So I'll let Jackie take some of his stories from there.
Well, Tommy, you're very generous with your descriptions of me and my career back then, but this guy was pretty special. He led the nation in average yards per rush, for a couple of years there, I think, and that's pretty good for a little bandy-legged guy with a bunch of guys up front that couldn't block very good. As a matter of fact, we played good defense, but our offensive prowess was not very, very great, as a matter of fact. But what Suge did, like Tommy said, he didn't say a lot of rah-rahs, but what he did was he had a staff of assistant coaches that worked us really hard, led us into work. There's a difference. I really think that all the good coaches are not pushers, they're leaders, and they make you want to work. Because if you don't want to work, when you get there, you're not going to work towards doing what needs to be done. And Suge was good at doing that. He set the stage for us. And I know that Vince coached under him, and I'm sure that he took some of his coaching ways with him wherever he went. And of course, Vince was very, very successful at Georgia for a number of years. But I just was very fortunate to come along at a very good time. I was not highly recruited out of high school. As a matter of fact, I did get an offer to go to Alabama, but at that time, Alabama's program was not in very good shape, and I didn't consider that to be the top of the line. I really wanted to go to Florida. And I think somebody else mentioned the fact that the school that they really liked to play against was somebody that didn't recruit them. And I'm from Florida, and I wasn't recruited by Florida. So every time we went down to play in Gainesville or playing the Gators, I usually had a pretty good game against them because I wanted to show them that they had made a big mistake when they didn't recruit me. But I just had a wonderful run there, obviously winning a national championship. When it happened, I didn't realize what it was, but I wear that ring now. I get shivers when I look at it because I know how valuable that is, how unusual it is to be national football champions, and I'm so proud of it. And I wouldn't take anything from my career at Auburn, and it's set the stage for me to do whatever I've done in my life, and I've been very lucky to continue to do the things that I've done. And it all started right up on the plains at Auburn, and I appreciate that so much. And my association with all these people here is just so great. As a matter of fact, my life has been full because it started at Auburn.
Well, I think all of us can express appreciation to you guys because of the foundation that you developed for the rest of us to kind of pave the way to give these other teams the great opportunities that they've had to succeed. And I mean, when you look back, you're talking about laying it on the line. We talk about laying it on the line. Have any of the rest of us played both ways 60 minutes that didn't play back in that era? You're talking about laying it on the line. You guys are the ones that laid it on the line, paved the way for us guys who've enjoyed the fruits of your labor and that type of thing. So from the rest of us, our hat's off to you for your commitment and what that foundation has meant to Auburn University from that point forward.
I echo that. I remember Mike and I were talking about on the way up. It's one of my fondest memories, and I shared it with Ken at lunch. And I know Kenny will remember right outside the mess hall at Sewell, they had a picture case, and it had all of the great players in there, and had Jackie Burkett and Ken Rice and Tucker Frederickson and Tommy Larino, and y'all were bigger than life for us. I mean, y'all were bigger than life, and that's what inspired us when we were there. Is we wanted one day to have our picture in there with you guys. So this has been a super treat for me to be up here. It really has.
Add to what Jackie and Tommy said, I came to Auburn in fall of '57, September '57, 17-year-old kid. Moved in with Tommy Larino and Lloyd Nix. They were my upperclassmen. You couldn't do better than that. But in those days, we did go 60 minutes, but I wasn't big enough or old enough to play on the varsity. They made me play on the freshman. But all the other teams, in the conference, you only had to play these guys for 2 hours one day. We played them 2 hours every day, and we had fun.
Well, I think Tommy has expressed an idea that I have had for many years. And talking about the teams other than football, I feel that winning is a contagion. If you have a team that's winning, it's contagious for the other groups that you have. And of course, football sets the standard for any athletic department that you have. And if you have a winning team, it's a contagion, and you will see it spread to the other teams that you have. Another crazy thing about football, and I'm going to ask you guys, it's an idea that I have. There's not anything fun about football except winning, is there? I don't know of anything that's fun about it except winning.
You didn't play, King.
Huh?
I loved it.
You loved it?
I loved practice.
Yeah.
I loved
practice.
And Mike Colin loved practice.
I enjoyed every aspect.
But you were a great
All right,
trainer.
the games. Well, you win the game, so that's what you win. But if you do win, you don't have to have a bunch of folks around to have fun with. You can go out in the middle of a field, sit down under a big oak tree, and still have fun.
I'll tell you what makes it worth it. You talk about the off-season program, getting up at 6 o'clock, running, and, that off-season program would be cold. You're on that hard turf. You'd start out in sweats, but you'd get hot so quick. In the middle of the workout, you'd have to take your dang sweats off. Walking over there in the morning after the first week, you get the fumes. We were in that big bubble. You'd get the fumes. It's like Pavlov's dog. You'd start gagging just smelling the fumes because you're used to, throwing up every morning. But all that work every year, staying in the weight room, the spring practice, when Coach died, get mad, come down there and say, give these boys a chance, just run the dang ball, we ain't gonna throw it anymore. Where's it at? Coach, tell us that, don't tell them that. The corners are walked up and the safeties are walked up. When it's 5 or 6 against 11 every snap. But that Alabama game every year is the first 3 years in Birmingham. After that game, going back to that hotel and those folks waiting on you, you sit there and said it every year. I would do every bit of that plus twice more for that feeling you got coming out of that stadium and going back to that hotel. I mean, you were on top of the world for 3 weeks, a month. And you said, I'm gonna do it again to get back to this same spot next year.
Well, I'm gonna take it a step farther, and I'll get emotional. I have purposely not spoken today because few people know, most people know I have 3 passions in life. One is Jesus Christ, one's my family, and one is Auburn. And Auburn's been a passion of mine since I could breathe. Both parents going to Auburn, and just sitting in this room, being in awe, knowing what all you guys did. And I'm one of the younger ones here. I'm the only guy standing out, the only guys from the '93 team, and but for you, the foundation that you guys laid to give me the opportunity to beat Alabama's tail in Auburn is unbelievable to me. I was the kid growing up that wore the tearaway jerseys, that listened to the games on the radio, that was at the stadium in Legion Field, 10 years old in 1982, walking down the ramp from the upper deck in Legion Field, yelling, it's great to be an Auburn Tiger, and loving every minute of it. Growing up in North Alabama, losing to those suckers for 9 straight years and having to live with it. We can talk about the Georgia game. You can talk about the Florida game. And as players, there's certain games that are important to you. But in '93, when I stepped on that field, I stepped on that field for every little 10-year-old that was going to pretend to be that Auburn quarterback the next day. And to me, Auburn is ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Look at the astronauts. And to me, Auburn, we're fortunate. A lot of places, all they can claim is football. All they can look to is their national championships or this or that. Not at Auburn. At Auburn, we can look at who we are and what we are with pride and say it's hard work, it's passion, it's love, it's family. I don't care how many national championships anybody else has in this world. I'll challenge any program in America to come to Auburn and have the same passion for their university that Auburn has for it. Not just football players, but I'm talking about that 10-year-old in his backyard. I'm talking about that 85-year-old that went to Auburn, didn't play football, but will fight your tail off if you want to start talking about Auburn. To me, that's what Auburn's about. And just sitting in this room with you men, it's just incredible to sit here and listen to all the stories and everything, because Auburn is special. And like we've said all day, people outside this room know, but people outside of Auburn, they don't have a clue. And we're fortunate. Man, we're so blessed. I'm so blessed that Coach Dow offered me a scholarship. And I'll never forget, after the '89 Auburn-Alabama game, I'm standing there as a junior, and he told me he wanted me to come to Auburn. Shoot, that's all it took for me. You know, I'd been wanting to go there my whole life. And then, '93 to be able to, and I hated for Stan what happened to him, getting hurt. But for me to come in on fourth down, I'll never forget after the game, people talking all this stuff. Coach Stalin said I did it with my eyes closed, and everybody talked about I did it and I was cold, couldn't do it, all this kind of stuff. But what everybody failed to realize, I'd been preparing for that day all my life. Didn't have anything to do with that game week. Didn't have anything to do with my 3 years at Auburn before that. I'd been preparing for that day since I was born, to have the chance to come in and play against Alabama. And there's no other feeling like it. To know that you impact a family, and when I say a family, I'm talking about an Auburn family. And the thing that, to me about that game, it wasn't on TV. We were on probation and it wasn't on TV. I can't tell you the stories that Auburn people have come to me and told me where they were listening to that game at that time, what they were doing, the things they broke, how they scared any deer that they were trying to shoot that day, they could forget it because they sat there shooting their gun just up in the air, as many rounds as they had, just the stories that I've heard. And that's what Auburn is.
Well, that's what made, I think, Coach Dye, the '89 game that much difficult for us. Rob, I don't know if you were a senior. I was a senior that year. But, what Jackie Burkett went through and Ken Rice and, Henley, and the first time playing that game in Auburn was big.
In our backyard.
In our backyard, and they were undefeated, number 2 in the country. And it's the first time Coach Dye took us out of town. And we stayed out of town. We may have stayed in LaGrange or somewhere in Georgia. And the guys coming back into town, it was just a sea of orange and blue. I mean, it was you could feel the intensity. And when we were leaving Sewell, we were gathering up. You know how Tiger Walk is. You're gathering up at, you're getting ready, and Coach Dye comes from the study. And then the crowd met us on the upper part of the parking lot at Sewell Hall. And you know how we walk across, everybody together like we're sitting here?
3 or 4 folks apart.
We had to walk single file line from Sewell Hall to the stadium. And we all knew we were playing for much more than a football game. Or it was much more than that. And listening to Patrick, that just makes you think about all the stuff that we were playing for that day, Rob.
Hey, that Tiger Walk, it's I guess a fairly new tradition. We'd always walk 3 or 4 abreast going to the stadium, and you'd see somebody shake their hands. You couldn't do it. And it was an 8-minute walk. It was a 30-minute walk, and you had to fight to get over there. And you were hugging people you'd never seen before, shaking their hands, people crying.
Patrick, just
a hell of a feeling.
Talk about the win over Alabama and how important that is, and Coach Dye has expressed that. But it hurt them. It hurt them bad to lose to Auburn. And I'm going to tell you a personal story. regarding Coach Bryant. And I respect Coach Bryant. He was a very successful coach. Of course, he's 40 miles from my hometown. I have to go through it going to Auburn every time, you know. So, but he is. He was. I respect him for what he was, for the coaching he was. And I don't know if David ever got to meet him after the game or had any encounters with Coach Bryant, but I was fortunate enough to be named the most valuable player of that game. Junior in college, still green behind the ears, still a kid, basically. Not been exposed to the media or had the experience that Terry Henley had as far as associating with this press or anything, but I was invited to the banquet that they give each year to honor the recipient or the most valuable player, and it was held in January at the Civic Center in Birmingham. Had my tuxedo on. My mother was out there and had a day. I couldn't even, of course, I'm not a public speaker and very good at it, although it take a long time telling the story sometimes. But I was very nervous. Was going to have to give a acceptance speech. Coach Sam Mitchell helped me write he wrote a speech for me. It was just pretty canned and basic, you know. I remember the teammates, remember the coaches, but prior to that, we were sitting in a reception area waiting on Coach Bryant to get there. And John McKay was the guest speaker from USC. And I was standing with Pat Sullivan, the previous winners there, with Johnny Musso, and I was basically just hanging around, you know. Again, very out of place for me. Finally, Coach Bryant walks in. The crowd kind of parts, and he walks in. And he walks right up to Johnny Musso. And Johnny said, "Coach, good to meet you." He said, "Coach, I want to introduce you to someone. This is Bill Newton." And I respect my elders and I always stick my hand out to shake a guy's hand. And I stuck my hand out to Coach Bryant. I said, "Coach Bryant, it's very nice to meet you, sir." And it seemed like minutes passed by, but it was actually seconds. And he was a fairly tall man, and he looks down at me, and all he said in that deep voice was, "Yeah," and just walked off. That's it. And I'm not, you know, telling this story to degrade Coach Bryant at all. I'm just telling you that's how bad it hurt the man, you know, to lose that game. And I think I feel like that was the reason for that.
I didn't get a chance to meet him. Coach Davis, when Coach Dye came to Auburn, Coach Dye didn't have a spot for him, and Coach Bryant hired him at Alabama, and there was a coaching clinic the next year. And Coach Davis took me, and we're standing upstairs. Coach Bryant's coming down the hall. He said, "Coach Bryant, I want you to meet somebody." He walked up and said, "I know some bitch." He said, "Hold that." Nice guy. Just walked off.
I tell you, you know, in '72, Coach Bryant calls us a cow college before the ball game. And, of course, I lashed at him and told him he was an old man, you know, that had outlived his time. And you know, and said some other things about him. And of course, you know, it hit the media and everything. It don't call Auburn a cow college and everything like that. And I was fortunate enough to win the most valuable player of the Southeastern Conference, and you were the presenter in the Atlanta Touchdown Club at that. And Coach Bryant was at that meeting and at that function, and they asked Coach Jordan and Coach Bryant to come over and have a picture made together with me, and Coach Bryant refused. I mean, he said, I won't have my picture made with that boy. You know, and that's fine. I had the best coach in the land anyway, Coach Jordan.
You know, there's another milestone game, and Ben, I want to get to you on that, and that, of course, is going back to Tuscaloosa the first time. The Coach Dye talked about bad weather games. You got a milestone game and maybe the worst weather game in a long time, too.
Well, that was what I was going to say, touching on Patrick, you know, having the opportunity to beat Alabama in Auburn. I am blessed enough to be one of the few players and the only player in this room that has beaten Alabama in Tuscaloosa. And to me, to be able to do that and to be able to stand and be among such an elite group and have that to be my property is a great honor. You know, unfortunately, it wasn't a blockbuster game for anybody, but we won. It was 9-0. They didn't score. It was a true Auburn football game. It was defense and special teams. We had the #1 defense in the SEC that year. We didn't have any stars, but they all played as a unit, led by Alex Lincoln, Larry Casher, Rodney Creighton. I mean, we had got Rob Pate. We had guys on that defense that, like Coach Dye pointed out, you brought in a couple of talented guys, then you made up with what you had, and they played good as a unit. And winning that game is absolutely the most special game I've ever been a part of in my life. And to be able to go to Tuscaloosa, win first off, shut them out secondly, and put a cap on winning the SEC Western Division is something that I'll take to my grave. I mean, it's a great honor for me. Out of all the history that's been placed in Auburn football, and all the games that have been played, and all the quarterbacks that had ever played this game at Auburn in Jordan-Hare, but I am blessed enough by these gentlemen here that have laid the foundation to be able to go to Tuscaloosa in November of 2000 and beat Alabama in their backyard, like Rob pointed out.
A couple other games, milestone games, and Coach Dye, you alluded to them a little earlier. That '89 game getting Alabama to Auburn, but listen, I think you played in a game where it was really a chip on the shoulder game the first time that Coach Jordan and Coach Eves had gotten Tennessee into Auburn.
Oh, that was really...
And that built up for like a year and a half before.
It really did. That was just, the Auburn family, and again, the fact that it's just Tennessee and Alabama, as we all know, that wouldn't play on campus. And that game was all about respect as well as revenge. The respect factor that you had to load up and go to Birmingham to play Tennessee. As my understanding, Coach Jordan basically told the Tennessee folks what they could do with the contract, and it wasn't too pleasant if they weren't willing to come down. That was his last opportunity to play them there while he was coaching. And so that had an awful lot to do with it. The other factor was the year before up in Knoxville, it was like on the start of the game, they had stunts and everything to really, it's like they're trying to not only just take their quarterback out of the game, Randy Walls, but to just about cripple him. I mean, the way they were hitting him and doing him and everything, and he did finally have to come out of the game. On top of that, it starts raining. It's just terrible, terrible weather. And then Tennessee punts several times on first down. And I can remember seeing Coach Jordan there on the sideline just staring across at the Tennessee staff like, I can't believe you're doing this to me. I can't believe this. And he's just looking. He's taking his medicine very quietly and everything. Well, it comes around, to the next year. And Coach Jordan is real, real proud. This is the last feather in his cap to have Tennessee come into town. And we realized how important it was to Coach Jordan as well as to the Auburn family, because everybody was letting us know it all week. They really were. And Lee Gross, you played in that game. Thomas Gossam, you were there, and it was something special all week. You get up to that morning, going down to the stadium and everything, the same ritual we've all gone through to go out on the field and stretch, run a few plays, and you come back in, and everybody, slowly you start breathing a little slower and everything, and quit moving around. You're retying your shoes to get them tighter and getting a little extra tape, getting everything real tight before you go back out. And it was always just slowly, everybody just get totally still, totally quiet, one heartbeat, one breath. And about this time, when it's just not a single sound or movement, Coach Jordan would step on the step of the lockers and look around and say those few short words. And I know he had to have a few pearls to work so hard on this game right here, something he wanted to say special, and it would be brief and let us go. Right at that magic moment when he's about to step up, this wild man just comes busting into the locker room through the double doors there and just jumps right up ahead of Coach Jordan. I mean, it's like a Hollywood script, the timing and everything. And it's Randy Walls. Randy couldn't dress out. He broke his arm or dislocated his shoulder in practice, and it was in a sling. And Randy is crying so hard. He can't hardly breathe. You've seen some people cry like that when they get real upset. And he's up there, and he's trying to just get composed enough to say a word or two, and that arm's in the sling, and he's just beating his good hand down there, and he finally gets where he can talk. And he said, I would gladly cut off my arm just to go out there and play one play against those guys today. And starts crying again. As he starts to get off, he said, y'all just remember what they did to us last year up there. Well, he walks out, we're not moving or anything. Coach Jordan, he steps up there and he looks around that room, Coach, and he sees that special look in all his players' face that all coaches like to see before you go out there. And he realized he didn't need to say anything. And he said, hey, I think enough's been said. Let's get on the field and play ball. And we went on to win 21-0. Kenny Burks, Sub running back scores 3 touchdowns that day. Hadn't heard of Kenny. And everything's just one of those special, special days where you could feel the locker room vibrating inside that day before you went out.
They had really embarrassed us the year before. They got up 21-0, and it was raining so hard you couldn't see from here to Henley. And so when they got the ball, they'd punt it on first down. And we'd try to move it and punt it back, then they'd punt it right back. So we got up 21-0. We tried to get Coach Jordan to punt on first down one time, but he wouldn't do it. But right at the beginning of the game, I'd run a route, and I don't know if it didn't throw it to me, whatever, but we were running back to the huddle and running next to it, and it was hot. And you know how hot it gets in Auburn on that field. We were driving, and this guy from Tennessee, I think his name was White, he was a DB, and he said, "Man, it is hot down here." I said, "It's going to get hotter before it's over, baby."
Coach, the Tiger Walk tradition kept getting bigger and bigger, kind of culminated with that '89 game. You weren't always really a fan of that, were you?
No, I didn't like it. I didn't like it, but the players liked it, and I tolerated it. I mean, what do you say when you're getting ready to go? I mean, shit, you fixing to go to war. I don't necessarily want folks looking at me and laughing. Hell, I never knew whether to laugh or smile or shake hands or look mean or look whatever. And I was thinking about the game, and I wanted to get over there as quick as I could, but the players like it. And I mean, I probably would have liked it as a player too. But, and you know, Coach Dooley would tell you the same thing. I mean, hell, when you get like that, and when you get in that zone as a football coach, you can walk out there and, you know, playing for a conference championship, a national championship, national television in front of 85,000 folks, and not knowing there's anybody there but you. I mean, that's how you can. I mean, you can focus and. But the Tiger Walk that day, when I knew we were ready to play, and I knew we had a better football team than Alabama, even though we lost 2 games. We lost 2 games early in the year to Tennessee and Florida State, but we had gotten better and better, and I was worried about playing in Auburn, and so we went up to LaGrange and came back. But when we made that Tiger Walk that day, now, I wouldn't take anything in the world for being in that particular Tiger Walk, because I've never seen anything like it before in my life. I mean, just like whoever was talking about, I mean, it was old women and babies, and they was holding the children out for you. I mean, you know, and I promise you, I said it's like when they took down the Berlin Wall. I mean, I mean, you can imagine being in second class, all, you know, for however long, them son of guns wouldn't come to Auburn to play. And they finally had to come.
Coach, I can remember seeing you coming down that Tiger Walk, and your eyes were getting a little big. I think you could have played that day.
Well, I could have hit one lick. but the event was a lot more important than the outcome of the game. I'm telling you, the fact that they came and it was, I mean, it was a historical day, and then of course the team won and played well, and it turned out to be a perfect day. It's a day that I will never forget, is standing on the sideline over there. And I usually don't even know the crowd or cheerleaders or band, you know, I don't. But that particular day I did. I was standing down there in the north, it was so loud you couldn't hear the guy standing right next to you. And I looked over the student section down there, and the sun was setting, and it was an orange sky. And they were shaking them damn paper mache shakers down there so hard that there was a blue haze rising up, blue smoke fog rising up out of the student section. And it would kind of, I mean, it would make cold chills run up your back to see that happen like that. You know, I was sitting here and listening to all these stories, all you guys and myself, and you know, you got a special relationship with Auburn, and maybe you feel like you got a little closer relationship because you played football there. You feel like your blood and your sweat and your guts and all's there. But you know, the thing about, to me, that makes that special, sure enough special, is the fact that every Auburn student, whether they play football or they major in home economics or whatever, feels the same way about Auburn that you do. And that's, to me, the difference. And that's what you represent, you know, when you go out there and play.
You know, one more thing I'd like to add to what Coach and what Patrick said, you know, wherever you went to play on the road, no matter how far you went, when you pulled into that stadium on the bus, there were always some Auburn people there waiting on you, man.
That's right.
No matter where we went to play, they were always there waiting when you got there.
And it didn't matter how bad you might have been getting beat, they were always doing that. It's great to be an Auburn Tiger.
That's right.
I can recall several games, wherever they may be. I recall one, in fact, in 1998 when Gabe came in and was playing. We got beat pretty handily. We got beat pretty handily in 2000. But there were just as many Auburn fans in that stadium that at the end of the game as there were at the beginning. And they were all standing right next to all those Florida fans holding their keychains, doing their thing, but they were still taunting. It's great to be an Auburn Tiger. And that in itself is a wonderful feeling. I mean, just to know, like Coach Dye pointed out earlier, to know that those people love you, no ifs, ands, or buts. They're there to support you as an Auburn football player.
Talking about that game, before the game, I was about to go into the game, and we had a lot of people. We had a big tent out there, and there was a bunch of people, and I noticed a lady, she was just squalling. I mean, just crying. And, you know, and I thought she was hurting. And I asked her, I said, what's wrong with you? She said, I can't get a ticket. She was just, I mean, killed. I gave her my ticket. I said, you go enjoy that game. You know, and I sat right there and I watched it on TV. We had a big screen TV and all that. She wanted to be in there so badly. She was just crushed. And I gave her my ticket. I said, you go, you go. I don't even know who the lady was. To this day.
You know, Paul, I do want to recognize someone who's not able to be with us, obviously not with us anymore, but I know he's a true legend for Auburn. It's Jim Fife. 22 years, voice of Auburn. You know, a lot of us, including me, Patrick hit on it, have a lot of memories of bye-bye Bo, Bo over the top, you know, so forth and so on. And I was blessed, and Quint's blessed. I was able to listen to Jim growing up, play on the field when he was calling it, and then go to the booth. And that is just, you know, I can go to heaven happy because of being able to do that. But Jim Fife is a true legend and true Auburn man.
Well, I think the Auburn family, I mean, it extends so much farther than just that football field. You know, like wherever we go and play a game, you know, sure there's going to be fans there, but I can remember in 1986 when I was traded from the Buffalo Bills to San Francisco 49ers, and the very first day that I got out there on the practice field, and San Francisco at that time had a giant green tarp around the practice facility, and you'd see fans kind of peeling it back where they could see through the cracks to see what was going on. And I remember we jogged out on the field, and the first thing that I heard when I got on the field was War Eagle. And, you know, that made me feel very much at home, you know, and it's amazing how far our family extends.
It extends even farther than that. I never forget, I went to Canada, and my first year up there, I was Rookie of the Year, and I was in a parade, and they had this big life-size poster of me, right, and I was standing beside it on the float, and I heard this War Eagle, and I said, no, I didn't hear what I just heard. And I heard War Eagle, and I looked over, and this guy was just like, Auburn, 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 man, please, please. You know, ran up to the float and everything, and I was like, man.
Yeah, you got to keep in mind that it wasn't the team that you were on. Like when it wasn't San Francisco, it wasn't the 49ers. That, you know, they were yelling War Eagle because of Auburn.
Well, I was in New Zealand a few weeks ago, and I'm eating at a restaurant, and I got an Auburn hat on, and I go to pay and start to walk out the door, and a lady and her daughter is sitting at this small table, and I start to get to the door, and she says, War Eagle. And I turned around and I said, "Oh, you went to Auburn?" She said, "I went to Auburn. My brother, my mother, all of us." She said, "I'm from Mobile, Alabama. I live here. I've lived here for 20 years." You know, so it's every place. It's every place.
I think the eagles soaring around the stadium, and that doesn't run cold chills through your blood.
It does, doesn't it?
Let me tell you a story about the Eagle. Last time that we were successful over against Georgia over in Auburn, I guess that was you.
It's 2001. 99 was
Well, down in the curve of the end zone where the Georgia section ends and the Auburn section begins, or vice versa, these Auburn guy was sitting beside the Georgia guy, and they started, you know, mouthing off at one another before the game, and the Georgia guys talking about how they're going to kick us that day and all this kind of stuff, and so Uga was down there chasing around and all this kind of stuff, and so in a minute, they turned that eagle loose, and that thing was, perhaps that day was most spectacular, in my opinion, from a pure collegiate, what college football is all about. I think the Auburn-Georgia game is what it's all about, what it should be. Now, war and beating Alabama is the most important game we got. But if you want from the color and the spectacle of the thing and all that, I think Auburn-Georgia game is what it should be. What colors of the red and black and the orange and blue and the weather and everything. But that eagle was especially soared for a long time, and then it came in, and that Auburn guy jumped up in there and said, "Let's see that Uga SOB top that." He's laying down there on a bag of ice.
That's how we knew when it was about time to play. Because that started when Coach Tuberville got there. And, you know, I've never been lucky enough to see the eagle fly. And, you know, that is something that has touched many people. I've had numerous, speaking of that specific game, I've had hundreds of Georgia fans, because I grew up right in the thick of it, tell me that is the most spectacular thing they've ever seen in all of sports. And that really and truly is how we knew when it was time to play. And anybody that's heard Coach Tuberville give a pregame speech, he's not big on pregame speeches. He just gives the old guys, let's go, it's time to play. Hayes in the barn kind of thing. But when we heard that, whoa, we knew what was going on. And we knew when the crowd erupted, okay, he's hit that rat on the field, and let's go.
You talked earlier about how you put together a team and those special players and recruiting. Well, there's a guy that couldn't be with us today.
Well, Bo's had something yesterday. I was traveling today and couldn't be here, and you know, you know, the ones that would play with Bo, that knows what he meant to our football team and Auburn University at the time. It's just like, you know, it's a similar thing that Georgia had with Herschel. I don't know what kind of record y'all had in '79, but you win the national championship in '80. And, you know, and Bo came in as, and we, of course, we didn't have any idea that he was that kind of talent, because he you know, we knew he was a great defensive football player, and in his last 3 or 4 games in senior year in high school, he rushed for a couple of 100 yards, but you know, they had another little halfback that started early in the years for the starting tailback. And he was out there at McCall, didn't get that highly recruited, thank goodness. But anyway, you know, Bo told me he was coming to Auburn, and I never asked him again. When he told me he's coming, I didn't never want to give him a chance to tell me he wasn't coming. So I never asked him again, and then, of course, he gets drafted by the Yankees #1 and all. We go through all that. I don't even pick up the phone and call him and ask him about the Yankees. Steinbrenner, I said, you know, if he wants me to know, if he ain't coming to Auburn, I figure he'll tell me. But anyway, you know, that talent at that time, you know, gave us a chance against everybody we played. And that's what he meant to us in 1982 when we went to Birmingham. And of course, I can't imagine, maybe some of you guys can as players, imagine the pressure on a freshman like that going into that game. And going back to Birmingham, and because he sat at the bus station all night long, the open date week on Saturday night. You know, I guess that stuff built up. But anyway, I found out about it, and I said, "You get him over here, let me talk to him." And he didn't want to say much. He didn't talk much anyway. But I told him, I said, "Bo," I said, let me tell you something. I said, we haven't beaten Alabama in 8 years or 9 years, whatever it was. And I said, your presence on this football team gives us hope, gives the Auburn people hope when they go to Birmingham. And I said, can you imagine what it's like and what it's been like to go up there without hope to win that football game? And he said, Coach, I'll be fine. And of course, you know, the rest of it's history. And he's the difference in the ball game. Coming down the stretch in the fourth quarter, you know, we're giving it to him, and he makes a 53-yard run, sets up a field goal, and then takes it down there and he make plays. But not only that, you know, the game he had against them the next year, and the game he had against Florida, and had great games against Georgia, and he's always represented Auburn in a positive way. Now I can't say that he's, you know, always been personable to all of you or all of us or whatever, and but I can't imagine what it'd be like living in the spotlight like he has to live, like Herschel has to live, and all. But I know one thing, that he meant a lot to Auburn University, and Auburn means a lot to him, and he's always, you know, when he's been on national television, he's always been proud of the fact that he was an Auburn man and an Auburn fan, and he's always represented himself and his family and Auburn University in a positive way. And I'm sorry he couldn't be here today.
And Coach, that's going to wrap it up. Guys, it's an honor for me to just share this with you, and you're representing Auburn fans and Auburn people back through the years, and you did it well. And there's 1,000 more stories I know, but that's all we got time for today. Thank you very much.
It was a big war eagle. If we're gonna do it now, if we're gonna do it, we gotta do it right.
All right, bring it in.
Bring it in if we can reach. Are you ready? Ready! I started from the bottom.
What better way to sum up the history and tradition of Auburn football than by hearing it from the mouths of the people who lived it? 31 Auburn Tiger football legends talking about their lives. The stories, the traditions, the victories and defeats. These are the people who made the Auburn University football program one of the best in the country for the past decades. And the legacy they pass along will help make the Auburn Tigers a force to be reckoned with in the decades to come.